Don't be afraid. Just lift my skirt. You must see what I'm hiding. The night sky exploded in streaks of purple and silver. Javier Mendoza lowered his telescope, his heart hammering against his ribs as he watched the object plummet toward the Earth. 20 years studying the cosmos from this lonely desert observatory, and he'd never seen anything like it. The falling object wasn't a meteor. Its descent was too controlled, too deliberate, like a wounded bird struggling to land. He grabbed his emergency kit and flashlight, then raced to his truck. The impact site couldn't be more than 5 miles away, somewhere in the canyon beyond the red rocks. The engine roared to life, and Javier tore down the dirt road, dust billowing behind him like a phantom. Thunder rumbled overhead. The storm he'd been tracking was moving in faster than predicted. Rain began to pelt the windshield as he navigated the treacherous path, his headlights cutting through the darkness. Another flash of lightning revealed something metallic wedged between 2 boulders. Javier parked and approached on foot, his boots crunching on loose gravel. The craft, because that's what it was, undeniably, was roughly the size of a small car, its surface smooth and opalescent, pulsing with fading light. Part of it had crumpled on impact, and through a crack in the hull, he could see movement. "Hello." His voice felt absurdly small against the storm. "Can you hear me?" A sound emerged from within, not quite words, but not random noise either. Something between a melody and a plea. Javier's hands trembled as he wedged his fingers into the crack and pulled. The metal was warm, almost organic, and it gave way easier than expected. Inside, surrounded by what looked like crystallized foam, was a woman. Except she wasn't human. Her skin was a deep, luminous purple, like twilight made flesh. Her hair fell in waves of darker violet around her shoulders. She was unconscious, her breathing shallow, and despite the alienness of her appearance, Javier found her strangely, powerfully beautiful. A gash across her temple seeped something that glowed faintly silver in the darkness. "Okay," he whispered to himself. "Okay. You can do this." Carefully, he lifted her from the wreckage. She was warm in his arms, surprisingly light, and he could feel a rapid heartbeat against his chest. As he carried her to the truck, her eyes fluttered open, enormous eyes, deep amber with flecks of gold that seemed to hold entire galaxies within them. She looked at him, not with fear, but with something like relief. Her lips moved, forming words in a language that sounded like music and mathematics combined. Then her eyes closed again, and she went limp. The drive back to the observatory was the longest of Javier's life. Rain hammered the truck while his mind raced with impossible thoughts. What was he supposed to do? Call the authorities? They'd take her, dissect her, turn her into a specimen. The thought made him sick. Inside his living quarters, he laid her on his bed and gathered medical supplies. His hands had delivered lambs and set his own broken finger once. Hopefully, that was enough. As he cleaned the wound on her temple, her skin seemed to shimmer, responding to his touch with subtle shifts of color. "Where did you come from?" he murmured, carefully applying bandages. "Why are you here?" Outside, the storm raged. Inside, in the warm glow of lamplight, Javier sat in a chair beside the bed, watching this impossible visitor sleep. Her breathing had steadied, and occasionally, patterns of light would dance beneath her skin like aurora borealis. He should have been terrified. Instead, he felt something else entirely, a sense of wonder he hadn't experienced since childhood, mixed with an inexplicable protectiveness. Whatever happened next, he knew one thing with absolute certainty: his life would never be the same. The purple woman's hand twitched, and Javier gently took it in his own, marveling at the warmth, the realness of her. "You're safe here," he promised, though she couldn't understand. "I won't let anyone hurt you." As if hearing him, she squeezed his hand ever so slightly, and the faintest smile crossed her lips. Morning light filtered through the observatory windows, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. Javier woke with a start, his neck stiff from sleeping in the chair. The purple woman was awake, sitting upright in bed, her amber eyes fixed on him with intense curiosity. "Good morning," he said softly, rising slowly to avoid startling her. "How are you feeling?" She tilted her head, studying him. Then she touched her own chest and spoke a single word that sounded like Zephyra. The syllables were musical, like wind chimes in a breeze. "Zephyra," Javier repeated, pointing at her. "Is that your name?" Her face brightened, those remarkable eyes lighting up with understanding. She nodded, then pointed at him, her expression questioning. "Javier," he said, touching his own chest. "I'm Javier." "Javier," she attempted, the sounds clumsy but earnest on her lips. When he smiled encouragingly, she smiled back, and the sight of it made something flutter in his chest. Over the following days, they developed their own language. Zafara was a quick learner, absorbing English words with remarkable speed. She drew pictures to explain concepts, her world, her ship, the accident that brought her here. Javier learned she was a scientist, someone who studied quantum fields and dimensional pathways, though the specifics were still beyond their limited communication. She was fascinated by everything in his world. The coffee maker made her laugh, a sound like bells. She touched books with reverence, running her fingers over the pages. And she was captivated by his telescope, spending hours gazing at the stars with an expression of deep longing. "Home," she said one evening, pointing upward. "My home, far." "I'm sorry," Javier whispered. "We'll find a way to contact them. I promise." But as the days passed, Javier found himself hoping that rescue might take just a little longer. There was something intoxicating about Zafara's presence, the way she moved with fluid grace, how her skin would shimmer with subtle color changes he was beginning to recognize as emotions. Purple deepened when she was thoughtful, lightened almost to lavender when she was amused. One afternoon, while they were working on repairing her communication device with parts from his equipment, Zafara suddenly pulled back. She looked nervous, her skin flickering with patterns Javier hadn't seen before, swirls of deeper purple mixed with flashes of silver. "Javier," she said carefully, "I must show you. Important." She touched her collarbone, then the edge of her simple borrowed shirt. "You not afraid?" "Never," he assured her, though his heart raced. "What is it?" She stood and moved to the center of the room. With trembling hands, she began to unfasten the shirt. Javier started to look away, but she shook her head. "No. Please. You must see." As the fabric fell away, Javier's breath caught. Her torso was covered in intricate patterns of bioluminescent markings, geometric shapes that flowed like living tattoos across her purple skin. They pulsed gently, creating waves of light that traveled from her shoulders down to her waist, disappearing beneath the waistband of her borrowed pants. "My people," she explained, her voice soft. "We communicate. With light. With pattern. This." She gestured to the markings. "This is who I am. My thoughts, my heart." The word seemed difficult for her. "When I feel strong emotion, they grow bright. It is intimate, private. Like your thoughts, yes." "They're beautiful," Javier breathed, unable to look away. The patterns were mesmerizing, constantly shifting in response to her emotions. "Thank you for trusting me with this." Zafara stepped closer, close enough that he could feel the warmth radiating from her skin. "You saved me. You protect me. You deserve to see the real Zafara." She reached for his hand and placed it over her heart. The bioluminescent patterns beneath his palm flared brightly, pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. The sensation was unlike anything he'd ever experienced, a tingling warmth that seemed to flow up his arm and into his chest. "This pattern," she whispered, "means gratitude. And this." The lights shifted, creating spirals that spun outward from where his hand rested. "This means connection. Bond." Javier's other hand rose of its own accord, cupping her face. Her skin was incredibly soft, warm like sun-heated silk. "Zafara. I feel safe with you," she continued, her English improving with emotion. "In my world, to show these patterns, it means deep trust. It means." She struggled for the word, then simply took his other hand and placed it on the opposite side of her ribcage. The patterns exploded into brilliant light, cascading across her skin in waves. Javier could feel each pulse, each shift of color and meaning. It was like she was letting him read her very soul. "It means I see you as more than rescuer," she finally said. "More than friend." The air between them felt charged, electric. Javier leaned closer, his forehead coming to rest against hers. I don't want you to go, he admitted. Is that selfish? No. Her hands came up to rest on his chest, and he wondered if she could feel his racing heart. I do not want to go either. But my people, they will search for me. Then we have time, Javier said. However long it takes them to find you, we have that time. Zafara's patterns shifted again, this time creating a design that looked almost like a smile spread across her skin. Then I will use this time to know you, Javier Mendoza. All of you. She stepped back slowly, letting him see the full display of her bioluminescent communication. It was a dance of light and meaning, more intimate than any words could be. And in that moment, Javier understood that whatever was growing between them transcended the boundaries of species or worlds. Will you teach me, he asked, to understand your light? Yes, she said, her smile radiant. And you will teach me to understand your words. We will learn each other. As the sun set outside, painting the desert in shades of purple that matched her skin, Zafara began his first lesson in the language of light, a language, he was discovering, that his heart already seemed to understand. The observatory had become their sanctuary, a small universe where two worlds existed in harmony. 3 weeks had passed since the crash, and the changes in both of them were undeniable. Javier had learned to read the subtle shifts in Zafara's bioluminescence, the way her patterns tightened when she was concentrating, how they pulsed faster when she was excited or amused. And Zafara had bloomed in ways that made his chest ache with tenderness. She wore his shirts like dresses, rolled at the sleeves, and she developed a fondness for his morning ritual of coffee on the observation deck, watching Earth's sun rise over the desert. Your star is smaller than mine, she told him one morning, her English now nearly fluent with only the occasional charming mispronunciation. But it is warmer, somehow. More intimate. That's one word for it, Javier said, refilling her cup. Others might say it's just ordinary. Nothing is ordinary, Zafara insisted, touching his arm. Her patterns flickered with what he'd learned meant affection, soft waves of lighter purple with hints of gold. You taught me this. Every star is unique. Every world is precious. Their days fell into a comfortable rhythm. Mornings were spent working on her communication device, though Javier noticed she seemed less urgent about it lately. Afternoons, she helped him with his research, offering insights from her own advanced understanding of astrophysics that made his head spin. And evenings were for them. They'd cook dinner together, Zafara marveling at Earth's ingredients and spices. She was surprisingly adept in the kitchen, though her people apparently didn't use heat to prepare food. They used some kind of energy field manipulation that she couldn't replicate with Earth technology. This is called a tomato, Javier explained one evening, showing her how to slice vegetables for a salad. It's technically a fruit, but we use it like a vegetable. Your world is delightfully illogical, Zafara laughed. Her hands moved with newfound confidence, though she still marveled at simple things like the texture of lettuce or the smell of fresh basil. After dinner, they would climb to the observation deck with blankets and Javier's telescope. He'd teach her the names of Earth's constellations, Orion, Cassiopeia, Ursa Major, while she'd point out her own star, so distant it was barely visible even with his equipment. What's it called? He asked one night, as she guided his hand to adjust the telescope's focus. In your language. She considered, it would be something like the violet crown. Our sun is purple, like me. The light makes everything look different than here. Our plants are silver and blue. Our oceans are dark, like your night sky. Do you miss it? Zafara was quiet for a long moment, her patterns swirling thoughtfully. Yes. But also, no. Here, I have found something unexpected. She turned to face him, and in the starlight, her skin seemed to glow from within. On my world, I am just a scientist. Respected, but alone. Always working, always searching. But here, with you, I feel seen. Javier reached for her hand, threading his fingers through hers. The gesture still amazed him, how perfectly their hands fit together despite their different origins. I see you, Zafara. All of you. I know. Her free hand came up to cup his cheek. This is why it is frightening. What do you mean? My people, she began, her voice dropping to barely a whisper, we do not love like humans. We bond through our light patterns, through energy exchange. It is scientific, logical. We choose partners based on compatible genetics and intellectual merit. Her patterns flickered rapidly, betraying agitation. But what I feel for you, it is not logical. It makes no scientific sense. The best things rarely do, Javier said, pulling her closer. They were sitting side by side on the blanket now, the desert spreading endlessly below them, the stars wheeling overhead. Love isn't something you calculate. Love, she repeated the word like a prayer. Is that what this is? I think so. For me, at least. His heart hammered as he made the confession. I know it's crazy. I know you'll have to leave eventually. But yes, Zafara, I love you. Her patterns exploded into brilliant light, so bright he had to squint. The bioluminescence danced across her skin in cascading waves, creating designs he'd never seen before, intricate spirals and starbursts that seemed to tell a story of wonder and joy and terror all at once. In my culture, she said breathlessly, when we feel overwhelming emotion, our light becomes uncontrollable. Right now, I cannot hide what I feel. I cannot mask it or moderate it. She took his hand and pressed it to her chest, where the patterns pulsed most intensely. This is what you do to me, Javier. This is how you make me feel. He could feel it, the energy flowing through her, the rapid heartbeat, the warmth of her skin. It was intoxicating. There is more, she whispered. Things I have not shown you. Patterns that appear only in moments of deepest intimacy. On my world, to reveal these is like bearing your soul. Don't be afraid, Javier said, echoing her own words from weeks ago. Show me. Zafara stood, pulling him up with her. The blanket fell away as she began to unfasten her shirt, his shirt. Her movements were slow, deliberate, her eyes never leaving his. The fabric slipped from her shoulders, revealing the patterns he'd seen before, but now they were different. More intense. More alive. These patterns on my torso, you have seen, she said. But there are others. Hidden. Sacred. She unfastened her pants, letting them fall. Javier's breath caught as new patterns revealed themselves, flowing down her hips, spiraling around her thighs, creating designs that seemed to move with every breath she took. They pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat, growing brighter wherever his gaze lingered. In my world, these patterns are only revealed to a chosen mate, she continued, stepping closer until their bodies were nearly touching. They respond to desire, to connection, to love. Watch. She took his hand and placed it on her waist. The moment his skin touched hers, the patterns beneath his palm flared brilliantly, then began to spread, creating new designs that wrapped around where he touched her, as if his touch itself was writing poetry on her skin. You see, she breathed. My body recognizes you. My light calls to you. This has never happened with anyone from my world. Only you. Javier's other hand rose to cradle her face, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw. Where he touched, new patterns bloomed, delicate as lace. You're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Then see all of me, Zafara whispered. She pressed closer, eliminating the last space between them. Her arms wrapped around his neck, and he felt the full warmth of her body against his. The patterns didn't just glow, they seemed to reach for him, responding to his touch, his breath, his heartbeat. It was like her entire being was attuned to his presence. When their lips finally met, Javier felt a surge of something electric pass between them. Zafara gasped against his mouth, her patterns flaring so brightly they lit up the entire observation deck. He could taste something sweet on her lips, could feel the warmth of her breath mingling with his. Javier, she moaned his name, and it sounded like music. He lifted her easily, her body light in his arms, and carried her inside. The observatory bedroom had become their shared space, filled with her drawings and his books, her alien technology mixed with his Earth equipment, a perfect blend of two worlds. They fell onto the bed together, a tangle of limbs and light and longing. Javier's hands explored the patterns on her skin, learning that certain areas made her shiver, others made her laugh, and still others made her arch into his touch with desperate need. Here, she guided his hand to a spiral pattern just below her ribs. This is where my people feel pleasure most intensely. When he touched her there, her whole body lit up like a star going nova. Her back arched, her fingers dug into his shoulders, and a sound escaped her throat that was pure ecstasy. The patterns raced across her skin, creating new designs he'd never seen, fractals of light that seemed to tell the story of their connection. They made love slowly, carefully, learning each other's bodies with reverence and wonder. Zephyra taught him the language of her light, showing him which patterns meant pleasure, which meant desire, which meant love so overwhelming it had no name. And Javier taught her the language of human touch, the power of a kiss, the intimacy of whispered words, the profound connection of two bodies moving as one. When they finally collapsed together, breathless and shining with sweat and bioluminescence, Zephyra's patterns had settled into a design he'd never seen before, a perfect mandala centered over her heart, pulsing gently in time with their synchronized breathing. "What does this pattern mean?" he asked, tracing it with gentle fingers. "There is no word for it in English," she murmured, nestled against his chest. "But the closest translation would be home. This pattern means I have found home." Javier kissed the top of her head, breathing in her scent, something like ozone and flowers and stardust. "Then stay," he whispered. "Make Earth your home. Make me your home." "I want to," she said, and he heard the tears in her voice. "But my people." "We'll figure it out," he promised, holding her tighter. "Whatever happens, we'll face it together." Outside, the stars continued their eternal dance, indifferent to the impossible love blooming in a small observatory in the middle of the desert. But inside, wrapped in each other's arms, two people from two different worlds had found something that transcended the boundaries of space and species, something that might just be worth fighting for. Zephyra's patterns pulsed softly in the darkness, a gentle reminder that some lights shine brightest in the deepest night. The change came on a Tuesday morning, 3 days after their first night together. Javier was making coffee when he noticed the black SUVs through the window, 3 of them, kicking up dust as they wound their way up the access road to the observatory. His blood ran cold. "Zephyra," he called urgently. "We have company." She emerged from the bedroom, still wearing one of his oversized shirts, her hair tousled from sleep. One look at his face and her patterns shifted to deep indigo, the color of alarm. "Government." "Probably." Javier's mind raced. "They must have been tracking the energy signature from your ship. I should have been more careful, should have." "No." She crossed to him, taking his face in her hands. Her patterns swirled with determination. "You gave me these weeks. These perfect weeks. That is enough." "It's not enough," Javier said fiercely. "It will never be enough." The vehicles stopped outside. Through the window, they watched as agents in dark suits emerged, along with what looked like scientists carrying scanning equipment. A woman in a military uniform appeared to be leading the operation. "Dr. Mendoza," a voice crackled through a megaphone. "This is Colonel Patricia Hayes with the United States Space Force. We know you have an extraterrestrial entity on the premises. We need you both to come out peacefully." Zephyra's hand found Javier's. "What do we do?" He looked at her, this incredible being who had crashed into his life and changed everything. Her patterns were flickering rapidly, cycling through colors he recognized as fear and uncertainty. But beneath it all, that mandala over her heart still pulsed steadily. "Home. We run," he decided. "There's an old mining tunnel system behind the observatory. My predecessor showed me years ago. It leads down into the canyon. They will follow. Then we buy time." Javier pulled her toward his office. "Your communication device, is it ready?" "Nearly. Maybe 80% functional. Enough to send a signal, but I cannot be certain anyone will receive it, or how long until they arrive. Then we activate it now, and we hide until your people come." He began stuffing supplies into a backpack, water, food, a first aid kit. "We just need to stay ahead of them." Zephyra grabbed her device, a crystalline sphere wrapped in complex circuitry they'd built from his equipment. Her fingers flew over the controls, inputting commands. The sphere began to pulse with light, emitting a high-pitched frequency that made Javier's teeth ache. Done, she said. The signal is broadcasting. But Javier, even if my people receive it, it could take days for them to arrive. Maybe longer. Then we have days. He shouldered the pack and took her hand. Come on. They slipped out the back entrance as the agents began breaching the front. The tunnel entrance was hidden behind a rocky outcrop, concealed by years of desert scrub. Javier pushed aside the weathered boards covering the opening and they descended into darkness. The tunnel was cool and damp, lit only by Zafara's bioluminescence. Her patterns had shifted to provide light, a practical use Javier had learned about but never seen. She glowed like a living lantern, illuminating the rough walls and the path ahead. This way, Javier whispered, leading her deeper into the network of passages. Behind them, he could hear shouts as the agents discovered their escape route. They ran through the darkness, Zafara's light bouncing off ancient stone walls. The tunnel system was vast, remnants of 19th-century mining operations, long abandoned but stable. Javier had explored them as a younger man, curious about the history beneath his observatory. Finally, they reached a small chamber where several tunnels intersected. Javier pulled Zafara into a narrow side passage, and they pressed themselves against the cold stone, breathing hard. They will find us eventually, Zafara said softly. Her patterns had dimmed to barely visible, conserving energy. I know. Javier pulled her close. I'm sorry. I should have had a better plan. Should have. Should have what? Turned me away. Let me die in that crash. She cupped his face, her eyes luminous even in the near darkness. You gave me life, Javier. You gave me love. Whatever happens now, I do not regret a single moment. He kissed her then, deep and desperate. Her patterns flared bright, responding to the intensity of his emotion. When they finally broke apart, both were trembling. There has to be another way, Javier said. I won't let them take you. I won't let them turn you into some kind of experiment. Zafara was quiet for a long moment. Then, what if I surrendered? No. Listen, she insisted. What if I went to them willingly? Agreed to answer their questions, to help them understand my people? If I cooperate, they have no reason to harm me. And you would be safe. They cannot blame you for helping an injured being. I don't care about being safe, Javier said harshly. I care about you. And I care about you. Her patterns swirled with gentle affection. Which is why I cannot let you become a fugitive for my sake. You have a life here, work that matters. I will not let you throw it away. None of it matters without you. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with truth. Zafara's eyes filled with something that looked like tears, though they shimmered silver when they fell. On my world, she said softly, we have a concept, Tareshkar. It means the love that transcends logic. It is considered a weakness, an evolutionary flaw that we have mostly bred out of our species. But our ancient texts speak of it with reverence, as the most powerful force in the universe. She pressed her forehead to his. I understand now why the ancients revered it. Because I would destroy worlds for you, Javier Mendoza. I would defy every law of my people, every principle of logic. That is what you have done to me. Then let me fight for you, Javier pleaded. Let me. A sound echoed through the tunnels, voices, footsteps, the mechanical were of scanning equipment getting closer. Zafara's hand tightened on his. Do you trust me? With my life. The government facility was nothing like Javier had feared. Instead of cold interrogation rooms and prison cells, they'd been taken to a research compound in the mountains, a place where scientists worked alongside military personnel, studying the mysteries of the universe with curiosity rather than fear. Colonel Hayes, it turned out, was part of a special division dedicated to peaceful contact protocols. We've known about extraterrestrial life for years, she explained during their first meeting, conducted in a comfortable conference room with windows overlooking pine forests. But this is our first case of, well, intimate contact. Zafara sat beside Javier, her hand never leaving his. Her patterns were calm, diplomatic, the soft purple of cautious optimism. My people have protocols too, she said. We are explorers, Scientists, not conquerors. I violated several regulations by staying hidden, by not immediately signaling for extraction. Because of him, Colonel Hayes said, nodding toward Javier. It wasn't a question. Because of love, Zafara corrected. A concept my people have almost forgotten, but one I have learned is more powerful than any technology. Over the following days, they shared everything. Zafara submitted to medical examinations, all non-invasive, with Javier present, that confirmed what she'd suspected. Her biology had been altered by their bonding. While she wasn't pregnant, her body now carried markers of their genetic merger, a biological bridge between their species that fascinated the research team. This is unprecedented, Dr. Sarah Chen, the lead xenobiologist, said with barely contained excitement. Your bioluminescent patterns have incorporated human DNA sequences. They're literally rewriting themselves to accommodate both physiologies. What does that mean? Javier asked, his arm around Zafara's shoulders. It means, Dr. Chen smiled, that if you two decide to have children someday, it's theoretically possible. Your biology is adapting to make it happen. The words hung in the air like a promise. Zafara's patterns exploded into brilliant light, joy, wonder, and hope all mixed together. But the real breakthrough came a week later, when Zafara's people finally responded to her signal. Javier was in the compound's cafeteria, trying to eat breakfast while his stomach churned with anxiety, when alarms began to sound. He ran outside with everyone else, looking up at the sky. A ship hung in the air above the compound, not the small research pod Zafara had crashed in, but a massive vessel that seemed to shimmer between visibility and invisibility. It was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure, a testament to technology far beyond Earth's capabilities. They came, Zafara breathed beside him, her patterns shifting through a dozen emotions too quickly to read. They actually came. The ship descended slowly, landing in the open field beyond the compound. A doorway irised open, and figures emerged, 3 of them, their purple skin and elegant bearing marking them as Zafara's people. The lead figure, a tall male with patterns that spoke of authority and age, approached with measured steps. Zafara Kai 7th Light, he said in their musical language, which Javier's earpiece translated in real time. You have caused considerable concern. The Council demands your immediate return to face judgment for unauthorized extended contact with a pre-spaceflight civilization. Zafara stepped forward, her chin high. I understand, High Scholar Kalen. But I submit that my unauthorized contact has yielded discoveries more valuable than any planned expedition could achieve. She gestured to Javier, who moved to stand beside her. This is Dr. Javier Mendoza. He is a scientist of Earth, a man of honor and compassion. He saved my life. And in doing so, he gave me something I never knew I was missing, the understanding of what we have lost as a species. Kalen's patterns shifted with skepticism. Explain. What followed was the most important presentation of either of their lives. Zafara and Javier, working together as they had learned to do, explained everything: the crash, the rescue, the gradual building of trust and communication, the development of love, the biological changes, the potential for true interspecies cooperation and understanding. We evolved beyond emotion because we deemed it inefficient, Zafara argued passionately. But what if we were wrong? What if the capacity for deep emotional connection, for love, is not a weakness but a strength? Something that could bind different species together in ways that treaties and protocols never could. She placed Javier's hand over her heart, where the mandala pattern pulsed steadily. This pattern appeared when I bonded with Javier. It is not in our genetic database. It is entirely new, a biological evolution triggered by love. We are changing, Scholar Kalen. And perhaps it is time we allowed ourselves to change. The High Scholar was quiet for a long moment, his patterns swirling in complex configurations that Javier couldn't begin to interpret. Finally, he spoke. The Council will need to deliberate. But Zafara Kai 7th Light, you present a compelling argument. His gaze shifted to Javier. Dr. Mendoza, our people have much to learn from yours. And perhaps, you from ours. Would you be willing to serve as Earth's first official liaison to the Zephyran people? Javier's heart stopped. He looked at Zafara, whose patterns had gone completely still, the only time he'd seen her frozen with absolute shock. "Are you asking me to come with her?" he clarified. "The council must deliberate on Zephara's status," Kaelin said carefully. "But should they rule in favor of continued cultural exchange, and given this evidence, I believe they will, someone must serve as the bridge between our worlds. Someone who understands both sides. Someone who has, as you say, love for one of our people." Colonel Hayes stepped forward. "High Scholar, Earth would be honored to participate in such an exchange. Dr. Mendoza is one of our finest scientists and a man of exceptional character. But we would need guarantees for his safety and the right to return home if he chooses." "Agreed," Kaelin nodded. "This would be unprecedented cooperation. Historic. But then, this entire situation is unprecedented." Zephara turned to Javier, her eyes wide, patterns swirling with 100 different emotions. "You would leave your world? Your home?" "You said it yourself," Javier replied, taking both her hands in his. "Home isn't a place. Home is where you are." Her patterns exploded into light so bright that everyone had to shield their eyes. She threw her arms around him, and he lifted her off her feet, spinning her around while she laughed and cried simultaneously. "However," Kaelin continued, and his tone held something almost like amusement, "the council will need time to process this request. Perhaps several of your Earth weeks. Zephara Kai 7th Light, you would need to return with us to present your case formally." The light dimmed slightly. Zephara lowered her feet back to the ground, though she kept her arms around Javier's neck. "How long?" 3 weeks, perhaps 4. Enough time for Dr. Mendoza to arrange his affairs on Earth, and for you to prepare your testimony. Kaelin's patterns shifted to something gentler. Enough time to determine if this love is strong enough to survive separation. Javier wanted to argue, to demand that they not be parted even for a day. But he understood politics, understood the need for process and deliberation. And if 3 weeks apart was the price for a lifetime together, he would pay it gladly. "I'll wait," he said firmly. "However long it takes." Zephara cupped his face, her thumbs brushing away tears he hadn't realized he was crying. "And I will move stars to return to you," she promised. "I will argue before the council with everything I have learned about passion and persistence and the power of human determination." She smiled through her own tears. "You have made me human in all the ways that matter, Javier Mendoza. And I will make them understand what that means." They had 3 more days together at the compound before Zephara had to leave. 3 days that they spent memorizing every detail of each other, making plans and promises, dreaming of a future that seemed impossible and inevitable in equal measure. On the final night, they lay together under the stars, both sets of stars, Earth's familiar constellations and Zephara's distant violet crown, visible now that they knew where to look. "When I first crashed here," Zephara said softly, "I thought I had lost everything. My ship, my mission, my place in the universe. But I was wrong. I had not lost anything, I had found everything." "When I first saw you in that pod," Javier replied, "I thought you were the mystery of a lifetime. Something to study and understand. But you're not a mystery, Zephara. You're an answer. The answer to a question I didn't even know I was asking." She turned in his arms, her patterns creating a private light show just for them. "What question? What does it mean to truly live?" Javier kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "You taught me that. You crashed into my lonely little world and showed me that there's no distance too far, no difference too great, if you're willing to open your heart." "Your people have a saying," Zephara murmured. "Home is where the heart is." "Yes." "Then I am home," she said, placing his hand over the mandala pattern. "And wherever I go, whatever happens, this pattern will remain. A permanent reminder that I am yours, and you are mine, across any distance." The next morning, they stood together in the field as Zephara's people prepared to depart. Colonel Hayes had arranged for a small ceremony, Earth's first official farewell to an extraterrestrial visitor. Scientists, military personnel, and government officials had gathered to witness history. But for Javier and Zephara, there was only each other. 3 weeks, she said, her hands clasped in his. 3 weeks, he confirmed. And then the rest of our lives. The rest of our lives, she agreed. Learning each other's worlds. Teaching each other's languages. Building something new. He pulled her close one last time, breathing in her scent, feeling the warmth of her patterns pulsing against his chest. I love you, Zephyra Chi, seventh light of the violet crown. I love you with everything I am. And I love you, Dr. Javier Mendoza of Earth. Her voice broke. With a love that transcends logic, transcends species, transcends everything except itself. Their final kiss tasted of salt tears and starlight, of endings and beginnings intertwined. When they finally parted, Zephyra's patterns had settled into a design he recognized, the visual language for "until we meet again." She walked toward the ship, pausing once to look back. Javier raised his hand, and she mirrored the gesture, her patterns flaring bright enough to be seen from space. Then she turned and boarded the vessel, disappearing from view. The ship rose silently, impossibly graceful, until it was just another light among the stars. And Javier stood watching long after it had vanished, one hand pressed over his heart, feeling an echo of her warmth still lingering there. 23 days later, Javier stood in the same field, watching the sky. The government had been busy. Earth's first official embassy for extraterrestrial relations was under construction. Plans were being made for cultural exchanges, scientific cooperation, and diplomatic protocols. The world knew now that they weren't alone, and while there was fear and uncertainty, there was also hope. And Javier had been busy too. He'd resigned from the observatory, packed up his life, and prepared for the greatest journey any human had ever taken. His family thought he was crazy. His colleagues thought he was brave. But Javier knew he was simply following his heart to wherever it led. At precisely noon, the sky shimmered. The Zephyran ship descended, larger than before, a diplomatic vessel. Colonel Hayes had been informed, carrying not just Zephyra but a delegation from the council itself. History was being made with every passing moment. The airlock opened, and Zephyra emerged. She wore formal robes of her people now, shimmering purple fabric that enhanced her natural radiance. But the moment she saw Javier, all formality disappeared. She ran down the ramp and into his arms, her patterns exploding into supernova brightness. The council agreed, she gasped between kisses. They agreed to everything. Cultural exchange, diplomatic relations, and... She pulled back, her eyes shining. And they approved our bonding as the first official union between our species. You can come home with me, Javier. You can see my world, meet my people, and then we return here together. We will be the bridge between Earth and Zephyra, living proof that love can unite any divide. Javier's laugh was pure joy. When do we leave? Now, she said, taking his hand. If you're ready. He looked back at Earth, at the blue sky and familiar faces, at Colonel Hayes and Dr. Chen and all the people who had helped make this moment possible. At the world that had been his home for 39 years. Then he looked at Zephyra, at her radiant smile and the mandala pattern over her heart, pulsing with light that called to something deep in his soul. I'm ready, he said. Together, they walked toward the ship, toward a future that no one could have predicted but that felt absolutely right. Behind them, Earth continued spinning. Ahead of them, the stars beckoned with infinite possibility. And on Zephyra's skin, new patterns began to form. Designs that told a story still being written, a story of two worlds, two hearts, and one extraordinary love that proved the universe was far more wonderful than anyone had dared to imagine. As the ship rose toward the sky, carrying them both beyond the atmosphere and into the cosmos, Javier whispered against Zephyra's hair, "Take me home." And she understood that he meant both worlds, Earth and Zephyra, science and emotion, difference and unity. Because home, they had learned, wasn't about planets or species or physical space. Home was each other. Home was love. And home was wherever they chose to make it, together. The ship disappeared into the stars, leaving Earth's sky clear and bright, full of promise for all the tomorrows to come. The end.